This is the unmistakable sound of a protest. A very special kind of protest. And a very noisy one at that. The cacerolazo requires a pot, a cacerola, or a pan, and something to strike it with.
I'll keep doing this until the politicians understand that inequality in Chile is unacceptable. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. I still have plenty of pans left.
Banging pots and pans became famous in Chile in 1971, when opponents of the left-wing government of President Salvador Allende came out to protest food shortages and rationing. It was associated with the center and right-wing opposition. Sociologist Manuel Antonio Garretón remembers it well.
The
cacerolazo were part of the best organized protests that would lead to the military overthrow of Allende. The idea was to attribute it to civil society and women in the name of protecting their families and children. The irony is that 12 years later, the first major protests against the dictatorship brought the pots and pans back in the middle of an acute economic crisis characterized by hunger, especially among the poor.
Many assume that Chile was the birthplace of the cacerolazo.
But the practice of banging on pots and pans actually began in France in 1831 during a protest against King Louis Philippe I. A century later, they reappeared in Algeria during the so-called Night of the Casseroles during the War of Independence. And a decade later, they re-emerged here in Chile. From there, they have spread all over Latin America and back across the Atlantic into Europe and beyond.
One of the virtues of this form of protest is that you can do it day or night, on the street or from your home, where presumably there's less risk of being arrested, especially when there's a curfew. Depending on how widespread and noisy the cacerolazo, one can gauge the degree of support for a given protest. In Venezuela, for example, the pots and pans come out every time there's a blackout, or just a protest against President Nicolás Maduro. But the practice transcends all ideologies. It's simply the best way many people feel they have to make themselves heard. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Santiago.